I saved $63 to bring my mom home. Can you help me?
I didn't want
You
to.
look strong.
You left us
She
no
was
choice.
5 years old, barefoot on burning asphalt, holding out crumpled bills and loose coins to a Hell's Angel with a skull on his chest. Her hands were shaking. Her voice wasn't. She'd rehearsed those words for 13 days, alone in an empty house, eating cereal in the dark, waiting for someone, anyone, to say yes. She had no idea that within 48 hours, 987 Hell's Angels would tear across Oklahoma to answer her. Before we begin, subscribe to this channel and follow this story to the very end. I promise you, it's worth every minute. Drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Colt hadn't slept in 32 hours. He'd pushed his Harley Road King through the night from Tulsa, running south along Highway 69, chasing nothing but the white center line and the hum of his engine. That was how he dealt with things. When the noise inside his head got too loud, he rode until it went quiet. Cheaper than therapy, more honest than whiskey. Though he'd tried both, and neither one had fixed what was broken inside him. His bike started making a sound around mile 47, a grinding, ugly rattle deep in the engine. The kind of sound a man ignores because he doesn't want to deal with it. Colt ignored it for another 30 miles. That's what Colt did. He ignored things until they broke. Then he fixed them. Or he didn't. The engine seized outside a town so small it barely had a name. A gas station, a laundromat with cracked glass, and a diner called the Rusty Spur that looked like it had been dying slowly since the Reagan administration. He coasted into the lot, killed the engine, and swore. He pulled out his phone and called Torque, the club's mechanic. "Where are you?" Torque asked. "Middle of nowhere, head gasket's blown." "How blown?" "Dead blown. I can get a part to you by tomorrow afternoon. Maybe morning if I push it." "I'm not going anywhere," Colt said, and hung up. So here he was, stranded, 44 years old, 6'2", 235, brown hair going gray at the temples, a jaw that hadn't seen a clean shave in 3 weeks, and a leather cut so heavy with patches it could tell your life story, or end it. Road captain of the Iron Serpents, one of the most feared Hell's Angels chapters in Oklahoma, a man who'd ridden through tornadoes, buried brothers, broken bones he never got set, and never once asked anyone for help. Stuck at a diner, waiting. He bought a pack of Marlboros from the gas station and sat on the cracked bench outside the Rusty Spur. Lit one, squinted against the sun, decided he'd smoke the whole pack before the day was over. That was his plan. God had a different one. He was on his 4th cigarette when he heard it. A small sound, not crying, not talking, something trapped between the two. The sound a child makes when they're holding themselves together with everything they've got, and they're almost winning. Almost. It came from behind the building, near the dumpsters. Colt tilted his head, listened. He almost ignored it, almost. But something in the sound pulled at him, a frequency he couldn't name, like a wire being plucked somewhere behind his ribs, in a place he'd forgotten existed. He stood up, walked around the corner, and there she was. A little girl, 5 years old, maybe younger. Blonde hair pulled into a messy braid that someone small and clumsy had tried to do for herself. A faded pink shirt 2 sizes too big. Shorts with a torn hem. No shoes. Her feet were filthy, the soles red and raw from the pavement. She was sitting cross-legged on the hot ground, and spread out in front of her on the asphalt was money. Crumpled dollar bills, smooth flat with careful little hands. Quarters stacked in wobbly towers, dimes and nickels arranged in rows. A few pennies pushed off to the side, like they weren't worth counting. But she'd counted them anyway. She was whispering numbers, adding them up, starting over, adding again. 39, 40, 41. Colt stood there. She didn't see him. She was deep in her work. Her small forehead creased so hard it looked painful. Her fingers trembled as she stacked another quarter. 61, 62, 63. She looked up. Their eyes met. Colt expected her to scream, to run, to cry. He was a terrifying sight, a giant covered in leather, skull grinning from his chest, cigarette smoke drifting from his hand. Children crossed the street when they saw men like him. Mothers pulled their kids behind them. Old women clutched their purses. But this girl didn't flinch. She looked at him the way a drowning person looks at a piece of driftwood. Not with fear, with desperate, calculating hope. Her eyes were blue, wide, old in a way that no 5-year-old's eyes should ever be. She gathered her money, every coin, every bill, pressed the pile against her chest with both hands, clutching it to the faded fabric of her shirt like it was the most precious thing she'd ever held. Then she stood up, walked straight toward him, stopped 3 feet away, and held out her hands. "I saved $63, she said. Her voice was thin, steady, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing this speech for days, lying on a bed in an empty house, whispering it to the ceiling. "It's for bringing my mom home. Can you help me? You look really strong." Colt didn't move. The cigarette burned between his fingers. The ash grew long and fell. He didn't notice. Something inside his chest shifted. Not cracked, not broke. Shifted, like a locked door opening 1 inch after being sealed shut for 20 years. "What'd you say, kid?" "I saved $63, she repeated, louder this time, as if volume was the problem. "My mom got taken by bad men 13 days ago. I need someone to bring her back. I can pay." She pushed the money toward him. "You've been alone for 13 days? She nodded, then pushed the money at him again, more urgently. Her hands were shaking. "Please, I counted it 7 times. It's $63, is that enough?" Colt stared at the crumpled bills in her small hands. A 5, several ones, a $10 bill so worn it was soft as cloth. Quarters and dimes that smelled like a couch cushion and a coffee can. $63. She'd scraped together $63 from every corner of her empty house. Every pocket of her missing mother's clothes. Every crack in the sidewalk. Every envelope in every drawer. And she believed, truly, completely believed, that it would be enough to buy her mother back. Because that's what 5-year-olds do. They believe the impossible is just expensive. "Kid," Colt said. His voice caught. He cleared his throat hard. "Keep your money." Her face crumbled. The composure she'd been holding shattered like thin glass hitting concrete. "It's not enough," she whispered. Her chin trembled. Her eyes filled. "I knew it wasn't enough. I tried to find more. I looked everywhere. I looked in all the pockets. I looked under the couch. I looked in Mommy's purse and in the coffee can and in the jar by the stove. I even looked in the birthday card from Grandma June. I took everything, and it's still not enough." Hey, Colt held up his hand. "I didn't say I wasn't going to help. I said keep your money. You're going to need it for something better." She stopped, tears hanging on her eyelashes. "Like what?" "Like a big birthday cake, or one of those stuffed animals bigger than you are. Something good like that." She stared at him, processing, calculating, the gears turning behind those old young eyes. "You'll help me?" "Yeah, kid, I'll help you." "For free?" That word hit him like a fist in the sternum. For free. A 5-year-old girl standing in a parking lot had just asked a Hell's Angel if he would rescue her mother pro bono. Like she was negotiating a contract. Like the world had already taught her, at 5 years old, that nothing comes without a price. That help has a cost. That love has a fee. That even your own mother being stolen requires a transaction. "For free," Colt said. "Now sit down and tell me everything. Start at the beginning." Her name was Lily Parker. She sat on the concrete bench beside Colt. This tiny girl next to this massive man, a sparrow perched next to a grizzly bear, and she told him everything she knew. Her voice was steady, practiced. She'd rehearsed this story in her head 100 times, waiting for someone to tell it to. Her mom was Megan Parker, 27 years old, brown hair, green eyes. She always smelled like cinnamon because she worked mornings at a thrift store that was next to a bakery, and the smell came through the wall and stuck to her clothes. She worked 2 jobs, the thrift store in the morning, a cleaning service at night. She was tired all the time. Her hands were always dry and cracked from the cleaning chemicals. But every single night, no matter how late, she'd come into Lily's room, sit on the edge of the bed, and sing the same song, even when Lily was already asleep. "She sings even when I'm sleeping," Lily said. "I can hear it in my dreams. The same song every time. She never forgets the words." "What song?" "You Are My Sunshine." But she sings it slow, really slow, like it's a lullaby. Colt's jaw tightened. Megan had been clean for 4 years. Lily didn't know exactly what clean meant, but she knew it was important because her mom talked about it like a holiday. 4 years, baby. 4 whole years. She'd hold up 4 fingers and smile like she'd won something. Before that, there was a man. "A bad man," Lily said. Her voice dropped. "His name was Darren." "Darren Voss?" Colt asked. Lily flinched at the name, the whole body flinch of a child who's learned to associate a sound with danger. "He used to come to our house. He yelled a lot. He broke the kitchen chair once. In the mirror in the hallway. Mom would make me go to my room and lock the door. She told me to put my pillow over my ears and count to 100. Sometimes I had to count to 100 3 times before it got quiet. Then what happened? Then one day he stopped coming. Mom said we were free. She was crying when she said it, but she was smiling too, like she was happy and sad at the same time. Colt knew the name Darren Voss. Every Hell's Angel in the Southern Plains knew that name. Voss was a mid-level distributor connected to the Salazar pipeline. Meth and pills running from the Texas border through Oklahoma and up into Missouri. He wasn't a boss, he was a cog. But he was a paranoid cog. The kind of paranoid that comes from knowing everyone around you is a snake, and the only thing keeping them from biting is fear. Megan had taken something from him when she left. Not drugs, not money, a phone. A burner loaded with everything. Contacts, transaction logs, dates, locations, amounts. His entire network stored on a device the size of a deck of cards. His insurance policy against his partners. His leverage against his suppliers. His death sentence if it ever reached the wrong hands. Megan had hidden it, never told anyone where. And for 4 years that hidden phone had been her shield. The one thing keeping Voss from pulling her back into the darkness. The one thing keeping him from showing up at her door in the middle of the night. Until 13 days ago. Lily's voice went small, almost inaudible. It was nighttime. I was in bed. I heard the front door break. Not open, break. Like someone hit it with something really heavy. Then I heard Mom scream. Colt's hand tightened on his knee. His knuckles went white. "What did you do?" "What Mom taught me. I rolled off the bed and went under it. I stayed really quiet. I didn't even breathe loud." "What did you hear?" "Boots, big boots on the floor. Men's voices, deep and mean. And Mom was begging, but not for herself." Lily looked at Colt. Her eyes were dry now, past tears, in a place beyond crying. She kept saying, "Don't go in her room. She's just a baby. Leave her alone. I'll go with you. Just don't touch her. Please. She's just a little girl. Please." The parking lot was silent. The highway hummed in the distance. Colt could feel his pulse in his neck, slow and hard, like a drum. "Then they left," Lily said. "I heard the van doors, the engine. Then it was quiet. Really quiet. The worst kind of quiet." "How long did you stay under the bed?" "Until the sun came up. Then I went to the living room." She paused. The front door was broken, hanging sideways. I could see outside through the crack. Mom's jacket was still on the chair. Her shoes were by the couch. But she was gone. And you didn't call the police? Lily shook her head, hard, like the question scared her. Mom made me promise. She said if anything bad ever happened, don't call 911. She said they'd take me away and put me in a house with strangers, and I'd never see her again. She made me hold her pinky and swear. So I swore. So what did you do? I survived. She said it like that. One word, matter of fact. The way a soldier would say it, not a 5-year-old. Day by day, cereal from the pantry. She ate the Cheerios first because she didn't like them and wanted to save the Fruit Loops for last. Water from the kitchen tap. She blocked the broken front door with the heaviest chair she could push across the floor. A wooden dining chair that weighed almost as much as she did. She'd seen it in a movie once. A woman blocking a door with a chair. So she did it. She went to school the first 3 days because she thought she was supposed to. She walked 40 minutes each way. Nobody noticed anything wrong. Her teacher, Mrs. Garvey, asked her once if she was okay. Lily said, I'm fine. Mrs. Garvey said, good girl. And that was the end of it. Then Lily stopped going because the walk was too far and her shoes had a hole in the right sole and the pavement burned through it. Mrs. Calloway, the elderly neighbor 3 houses down, checked on her twice. She brought soup in a plastic container. She asked where Megan was. Lily said she was working extra shifts. Mrs. Calloway was 81 and her hearing was going, and she was on enough medication to sedate a horse. She accepted the answer. Or she forgot the question. Either way, she went back home and fell asleep in her recliner. And every single day, Lily collected money. She emptied the change jar in the kitchen, an old spaghetti sauce jar with a slit cut in the lid. She went through every coat pocket in the hall closet, every purse in the bedroom, every drawer in the kitchen. She found bills tucked inside envelopes, coins in a coffee can on the top shelf that she had to climb the counter to reach, a crumpled $10 bill inside a birthday card that said, Happy birthday, Megan. Love, Grandma June. She found quarters in the couch cushions, dimes between the car seats of the old Honda in the driveway that hadn't run in 2 years, nickels in a cup by the bathroom sink. She added it all up, again and again and again. $63. I thought, Lily said, and her voice dropped to barely a whisper, that if I had enough money, I could buy her back. Because that's what bad men want, right? Money? That's why they do bad things. For money. So if I gave them money, they'd give her back. She looked at Colt with those ancient blue eyes. Is $63 a lot of money? Colt couldn't speak. Not right away. He looked at the sky. He looked at the highway. He looked at the heat shimmering off the parking lot. He breathed. Then he looked back at this impossible girl. Lily, you did good. You hear me? You did really, really good. Better than most grown people would have done. Better than people 3 times your age. But is $63 enough? It's more than enough, he said. Now you let me handle the rest. Okay, she nodded. And for the first time since he'd found her, she looked like a child again. Not a survivor, not a negotiator, a child. The weight that had been pressing her into the ground lifted just a fraction, just enough for her shoulders to drop and her eyes to soften and her lower lip to stop trembling. Then she asked the question that nearly broke him. Are you a good guy? Colt almost laughed. He'd been asked a lot of questions in his 44 years. He'd been asked if he was dangerous. He'd been asked if he'd killed anyone. He'd been asked by police, by judges, by ex-girlfriends, by his own mother. But nobody had ever asked him this. Not like this. Not so directly. Not with everything riding on the answer. He thought about it, honestly thought about it, the longest 3 seconds of his life. I'm trying to be, kid, he said. Today I'm trying real hard. Lily studied his face the way children do, without mercy, without politeness, reading everything he wasn't saying. Whatever she found there satisfied her. She gave a single, decisive nod. Okay, I believe you. Colt walked back inside the rusty spur. He told Jolene, the waitress, to fix Lily a plate, anything she wanted, on him. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, the works. Then he stepped outside, lit another cigarette, and pulled out his phone. He called Deacon. Deacon, president of the Iron Serpents, 54 years old, silver beard, voice like a gravel road. A man who'd built the chapter from 12 guys in a garage to the most respected Hells Angels chapter in the Southern Plains. He'd held it together through wars with rival clubs, through federal investigations, through funerals and betrayals, and the kind of politics that would make Washington look honest. He was feared, he was respected, he was loved. In that order. Phone rang twice. Yeah. Deacon, it's Colt. Where you at? Stuck at a diner off Highway 69. Engine's dead, but that's not why I'm calling. Talk to me. I've got a situation. A kid, 5 years old, she's alone, has been for 13 days. Her mother was snatched from their home in the middle of the night. 3 men. The kid heard the whole thing, hid under her bed. Silence. The kid says the mother was connected to a man named Darren Voss. More silence. The heavy kind. Meth operation. Salazar pipeline. The mother took a phone from Voss when she left him 4 years ago. Burner with everything on it. Voss wants it back. He took the mother as leverage. The girl, she's safe? She's sitting in a diner eating pancakes. She walked up to me in the parking lot with $63 in her hands and asked me to buy her mother back. There was a sound on the other end, not a word, an exhale through clenched teeth, the sound a man makes when something hits him in a place he thought was armored. Bring her to the compound, Deacon said, right now. I don't have a bike. I'll send Bear with the truck. He's 40 minutes out. Copy. And Colt, yeah. This Darren Voss, I know that name. He's connected to the Salazar line out of Texas. Distribution, pills, the whole chain. He's not small time. I didn't think he was. Then you know what this means. We pull this thread. It doesn't end with one man in one farmhouse. This goes deep. I know. Good. Deacon's voice dropped. And when he spoke again, there was something in it that Colt had only heard a handful of times in 20 years. A sound like bedrock shifting. A man making a decision that would echo. I'm making calls. Every chapter. Every state. If this is what you're telling me it is, a child, a kidnapped mother, these animals, then we're going to send a message, the kind that doesn't need to be repeated. The line went dead. Colt stood in the parking lot, phone in hand, cigarette burned to the filter. Through the grease-streaked window, he could see Lily inside. She was sitting in a booth, her legs dangling high above the floor because she was too small to reach it. Jolene had brought her pancakes in a glass of orange juice. Lily was eating slowly, carefully, the way a child eats when they've been hungry so long that food feels like a miracle, like it might disappear if you eat too fast. She looked up, caught his eye through the glass. She smiled. It was small, uncertain, barely there, like a match struck in a dark room. It could go out any second. But right now, right this moment, it was the only light in the world. Colt nodded back. He didn't know it yet. Standing there with a dead cigarette between his fingers and a dead phone in his hand and a dead engine on his bike. He didn't know that nod was the first step in something that would shake the ground under 1,000 miles of American highway. The machine was already turning, and it was already too late to stop it. 38 minutes later, a black pickup truck rumbled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Bear. If Colt was big, Bear was geological. 6'6", 285, brown buzz cut, jaw like a cinder block, hands that looked like they'd been designed for demolition and repurposed for human use. Sergeant-at-Arms of the Iron Serpents, which meant he was responsible for discipline, security, and when necessary, violence. He was extraordinarily good at all three. He was also secretly the gentlest man in the chapter. He fostered rescue dogs, had 7 at home. He cried at animated movies and denied it fiercely. He once threatened to break a prospect's arm for kicking a stray cat outside the compound. This was not widely known, and Bear intended to keep it that way. He walked into the Rusty Spur and found Colt at the counter. "Where's the kid?" Bear asked. Colt pointed to the booth. Bear looked. He saw Lily, small, blonde, alone, methodically cutting her pancake into tiny, precise pieces with the edge of her fork. Something happened to Bear's face. It was like watching granite crack. His jaw worked. His eyes went hard, then soft, then hard again. He turned back to Colt. "How old?" "5. "Alone how long?" 13 days. Bear closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. He blinked it away fast. Too fast for anyone who didn't know him to notice. But Colt knew him. "Let's go," Bear said. They walked to the booth. Lily looked up at Bear, looked way, way up. Her eyes went wide. "Lily," Colt said, "this is my friend Bear. He's going to drive us somewhere safe." Lily studied Bear with the intense, unflinching scrutiny that only children and federal judges possess. No politeness, no social buffer, just pure assessment. "Why is he called Bear?" "Because he's big as one." "He's bigger than a bear. He's like a mountain with a face." Bear crouched down, a considerable engineering achievement for a man his size, and met her at eye level. "Hey, Lily, I heard you're pretty brave." "I'm not brave," Lily said quietly. "I'm scared all the time." "That's what brave means, kid. Being scared and doing it anyway." She thought about this, turned it over in her mind, testing it for truth. Then she held out her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Bear." Bear took her tiny hand in his enormous one and shook it with exaggerated gentleness, like he was handling something made of glass in heartbeat. "Nice to meet you too, Miss Lily." Something passed between them, invisible, unspoken, a contract signed in a language that doesn't use words. From that moment, Bear was hers. He didn't know it yet, not fully, but in the years to come he'd look back at this exact moment, a 5-year-old girl in a faded pink shirt reaching out her hand in a truck stop diner, and he'd know. That was when it started. That was when a child who weighed 40 pounds claimed a 285-pound Hell's Angel as her personal guardian, and neither of them ever looked back. The drive to the compound took 40 minutes. Lily sat in the back seat with her pile of money in her lap, watching Oklahoma roll by through the window. She didn't talk much. Neither did Colt or Bear. The truck was full of silence, the heavy kind, loaded with everything they were thinking but wouldn't say. Not in front of her. Halfway there, Lily spoke. "Colt." "Yeah, kid. Are there more people like you?" "Like me how?" "Big, with the skull jackets." Colt glanced at Bear. Bear kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah," Colt said. "There's a lot more." "How many? Like 100? Colt didn't answer right away. He thought about what Deacon had said on the phone. Every chapter, every state. He thought about what that meant, what it would look like when it arrived, what it would sound like. "More than 100, he said. "How many more?" "A lot more, Lily. Close to 1,000. He watched her face in the rearview mirror. She was holding her $63 against her chest, her eyes wide, processing. 1,000 people with skull jackets are going to help find my mom?" "Yeah, Lily, something like that." She nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense, as if the universe was finally doing what it was supposed to do. "Good," she said, "because the bad men were really big." Colt turned back to face the road. His hands were tight on the dashboard. Beside him, Bear's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Neither of them spoke again until they reached the compound, but both of them were thinking the same thing. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we are bringing her mother home. The compound smelled like engine oil, stale beer, and old leather. Lily walked through the front door holding Colt's hand and stopped. 14 men sat around a long oak table. 14 pairs of eyes, hard, scarred, suspicious, turned toward the door. The room went dead silent. Cigarette smoke curled in the air. A country song played low on a jukebox in the corner. The only sound that didn't know enough to shut up. Lily squeezed Colt's hand tighter. She didn't step behind his leg. She didn't hide. She stood there and looked at them the way she'd looked at Colt outside the Rusty Spur. Measuring, calculating, deciding. "They all have skull jackets," she whispered. "Yeah," Colt said. "They do." "Are they all going to help?" Deacon stood up from the head of the table. He walked toward them slowly, his boots heavy on the concrete floor. He stopped in front of Lily and crouched down. His silver beard nearly touched his chest. He didn't smile. Deacon never smiled when he was serious, and Deacon was always serious. "You must be Lily," he said. She nodded. "I'm Deacon. I'm in charge of these guys." He tilted his head toward the table. "Colt tells me your mom needs help." "The bad men took her," Lily said. 13 days ago. I saved $63 to get her back, but Colt said I should keep it for a birthday cake." Something moved across Deacon's face. Fast. A crack in armor that had taken 54 years to build. Then it was gone. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder. His hand was so large it nearly covered it entirely. "Colt's right," Deacon said. "You keep that money. We don't charge for this kind of work." "What kind of work?" Deacon looked up at Colt, then back at Lily. "The kind that matters." He stood, turned to the table. His voice shifted. The gentleness evaporated like water on hot iron. "Bear, get her set up in the back room. Food, blankets, whatever she needs. She doesn't leave your sight." Bear was already moving. He walked to Lily and held out his hand. "Come on, kid. You ever had a grilled cheese sandwich with 3 kinds of cheese?" "There's 3 kinds? Oh man, your life's about to change." They disappeared down the hallway. The moment the door closed behind them, Deacon's expression shifted. The gentle grandfather was gone. In his place stood the president of the Iron Serpents, and his eyes were burning. "Talk," he said to Colt. "Everything." Colt talked. He laid it all out. Every word Lily had said. Every detail. The broken front door. The 3 men. The van. Megan's screams. The ex-boyfriend Darren Voss. The burner phone. The 13 days alone. The $63. When he finished, nobody spoke. The room was a pressure cooker. 14 men, every one of them with a past they didn't talk about. Every one of them carrying damage they'd never repaired. They'd been shot, stabbed, arrested, betrayed. They'd done things that would make a prosecutor salivate and a priest weep. But there was a line. There had always been a line. And a man who kidnaps a mother and leaves a 5-year-old to starve, that man had crossed it so far he couldn't see it behind him anymore. A man named Stitch, vice president, barrel chest, shaved head, a scar running along his jawline from a knife fight 7 years ago, broke the silence. Darren Voss, I know that name. He ran product through Creek County 2 years back, connected to the Salazar line out of Texas. Meth, mostly, some pills. How connected? Deacon asked. Mid-level. He's a distributor, not a boss. But he's got muscle. 8, maybe 10 guys. And he's paranoid. The kind of paranoid that comes from knowing everyone around you would sell you out for a lighter sentence. Where does he operate? Used to be a farmstead off Route 7, past the old grain elevator, middle of nowhere. I heard he moved operations, but that was the last known spot. Deacon nodded slowly. He pulled out his phone and set it on the table. I've already started making calls. Tulsa chapter's mobilizing. Oklahoma City is on standby. Dallas sent word they're rolling at dawn. I got a call back from the Arizona chapter 20 minutes ago. They're sending 35 riders. The room stirred. 35 riders from Arizona was a statement. Arizona didn't move unless it mattered. When Arizona moved, people noticed. How many total? Colt asked. As of right now, 300 confirmed. More coming every hour. Chapters from Texas, Colorado, Kansas, Nevada, California, New Mexico, Arkansas, Missouri. They're all moving. I put out the full code. Straight pull. 13 days active threat. Child in danger. That's not a request for volunteers, Stitch said. No, Deacon said. That's a call to arms. Colt processed this. 300 and climbing. He'd seen the club mobilize before, for funerals, for runs, for shows of force against rival organizations. But never like this. Never this fast. Never with this kind of fury driving it. What are we looking at by the time everyone arrives? Stitch asked. Deacon's jaw tightened. North of 900. The room went still. You bring 900 men to a meth dealer's front door, Stitch said, his voice low. That's not a rescue. That's an invasion. The feds will be crawling all over this. ATF, FBI, state police, everyone's going to want a piece. Let them come, Deacon said. We're not breaking any laws. 900 men riding motorcycles on public roads isn't a crime. 900 men standing in a field isn't a crime. What Darren Voss did, kidnapping, assault, child endangerment, those are crimes. We locate the target, secure the hostage, and deliver the criminals to the authorities. Clean. Since when do we deliver anyone to the authorities? Someone muttered from the end of the table. Deacon's gaze snapped to the speaker like a rifle finding its target. Since a 5-year-old girl walked up to one of ours with $63 and asked us to be the good guys. That's since when? Anyone got a problem with that? Nobody did. Good. Stitch, I need intelligence. Where Voss is right now, how many men, the layout of whatever hole he's hiding in. You've got 12 hours. I'll have it in 6. Colt, your point. When we move, you lead the first team. This started with you. It ends with you. Colt nodded. He didn't trust himself to speak. There was something building inside him. Not rage, not adrenaline, something older, something deeper. Purpose. The kind of purpose that doesn't ask permission and doesn't negotiate with doubt. It just moves. One more thing, Deacon said. He looked around the table, meeting every man's eyes in turn. I don't care what any of us has done. I don't care what the world thinks we are. In 2 days we ride. And when we ride for that little girl in the back room who thinks $63 can buy her mother's freedom. We're going to prove her right. Not because it's smart, not because it's safe, because it's the only thing worth doing. He picked up his phone. Get to work. Chairs scraped, men moved. The compound, which had been still as a held breath, exploded into controlled chaos. Phones were pulled out, calls were made, maps were spread across the table, names were written, crossed out, written again. Down the hallway behind a closed door, Bear sat across from Lily at a small table. Between them sat 2 plates, grilled cheese sandwiches, golden and dripping, cut into triangles. Lily had already eaten half of hers. There was melted cheese on her chin. This is the best thing I ever had, she said. Better than pancakes. Way better than pancakes, Bear smiled. It was rare, that smile. It transformed his whole face from something that belonged on a most wanted poster to something that belonged on a stuffed animal. I'll make you another one later, he said. Lily set down her sandwich, looked at him with those ancient eyes. Bear? Yeah, kid. Are you going to find my mom? Yeah, Lily, we're going to find her. What if the bad men hurt her? Bear's smile vanished. He looked at this girl, 5 years old, alone for 13 days, who had walked up to a Hell's Angel with pocket change and asked for a miracle. And he felt something tear open inside his chest, something he'd spent 20 years building walls around. Something he thought he'd sealed off for good. Nobody's going to hurt your mom anymore, he said. I promise. You promise? I promise. My mom says don't make promises you can't keep. Your mom's a smart lady, but this one I can keep. Lily studied him for a long time, reading him, testing him. Then she reached across the table and placed her small hand on top of his massive fist. "Okay," she said. "I believe you." Bear didn't move. He couldn't. If he moved, he was going to cry. And the sergeant-at-arms of the Iron Serpents did not cry in front of anyone, especially not a 5-year-old girl who had just cracked him open like an egg with one touch and 4 words. "Finish your sandwich," he said, his voice thick, "before it gets cold." That night, Lily slept in the back room on a cot Bear had set up with 3 blankets and a pillow from his own truck. Her $63 was tucked under the pillow. Her shoes, the ones with the hole in the right sole, were lined up neatly beside the cot. Bear sat outside her door in a folding chair, arms crossed, eyes open. He didn't move. He didn't sleep. A 285-pound wall of muscle and ink, standing guard over a child who weighed less than his left leg. At 2 a.m., the door creaked open. Lily stood there in her faded pink shirt, eyes puffy, face streaked with tears. "I had a bad dream," she whispered. The men took Mom and I tried to run after them, but my legs wouldn't move. I was running as hard as I could, but I was just standing still. They just kept driving, and I couldn't." Her voice broke. Bear looked at her. She was shaking. Not the shivering of cold, the trembling of a child whose nervous system had been running on fear for 13 straight days and had finally hit the wall. He reached out. She climbed into his arms like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she'd been climbing into this man's arms her whole life. She weighed nothing. She was so light it almost made him angry. Angry at the world for putting this much weight on something so small. "You want me to tell you a story?" he asked. She nodded against his chest. "Okay. Once upon a time there was a warrior princess. But she wasn't a regular princess. She didn't live in a castle. She didn't wear a crown or a fancy dress. She wore a pink shirt and no shoes. And she rode a motorcycle." "Princesses don't ride motorcycles," Lily mumbled. "This one did, the biggest motorcycle in the whole kingdom. And she rode it everywhere, through the mountains, across the plains, over rivers, through storms. And every single time someone told her she was too small, she'd rev that engine so loud it shook the ground and she'd say," what would she say? She'd say, "I'm not too small. You're just not paying attention." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then in a voice already sliding towards sleep, "I like that princess." "Me too, kid." "Bear?" "Yeah? Don't let the bad men find me." His arms tightened around her. Every muscle in his body contracted. If anyone had tried to walk through that door at that moment, anyone, for any reason, Bear would have put them through the wall without a second thought. "Not a chance," he said. "Not a chance in this world." She was asleep in 3 minutes. Bear sat there holding her for 2 hours, barely breathing, until the first gray light crept under the door. The next morning, Stitch delivered. He walked into the main room at 7 a.m., dropped a folder on the table, and said 2 words. "Found him." Darren Voss was holed up in a converted farmstead 22 miles off Route 7, past the abandoned grain elevator. The property sat on 60 acres of flat nothing. 1 road in, 1 road out. Main house, a metal barn, 2 sheds, chain link fence, 2 guards on rotation, sometimes 3. 8 to 10 men total on site. And Megan was there, one of Stitch's contacts, a tweaker who owed the club a favor and valued his ability to walk upright, had confirmed it. A woman matching Megan's description was being held in the main house, upstairs, alive, bruised, thin, dehydrated, but alive. "He's trying to break her," Stitch said. "He wants that phone. She won't give it up. 13 days and she hasn't cracked." Colt thought of Lily's face. "She sings even when I'm sleeping. I can hear it in my dreams." Megan Parker had endured 13 days of hell and hadn't broken, because somewhere 30 miles away, her 5-year-old daughter was counting coins and waiting for her to come home. You don't break a woman like that. The thing holding her together is stronger than anything you can do to take her apart. What about Voss's connections, Deacon asked. The Salazar network, are they involved? Negative, Stitch said. Far as I can tell, this is personal. Voss went rogue. The cartel doesn't know, and they wouldn't approve if they did. Kidnapping a civilian draws heat. That's bad for business. So he's exposed. Completely. No backup, no cavalry, just his guys, 10 at most. And they're not soldiers, they're tweakers with rifles. Deacon smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who has done the math and likes the answer. Good. The calls kept coming throughout the day. The count climbed like a fever. 500, 600, 750. Every hour, another chapter confirmed. Men were leaving jobs, canceling plans, kissing their wives and kids goodbye, throwing a leg over their bikes, and pointing themselves toward a dot on the Oklahoma map that most of them had never heard of. By noon, the count crossed 800. By sunset, it hit 950, and they were still coming. Lily, meanwhile, had conquered the compound. Not on purpose. She was 5 and weighed 40 pounds. But she had a gravitational pull that none of these men, none of them, could resist. She sat at the big oak table with markers someone had bought from the gas station and drew pictures. Motorcycles mostly, and flowers, and a stick figure with brown hair and green circles for eyes that she labeled Mom in crooked letters. She asked questions constantly, relentlessly, without pause or apology. Who's that? What's his name? Why does he have a spider on his neck? Does it hurt to get a tattoo? Can I get one? The men answered every question, patiently, completely. They showed her their ink and told her their road names and the stories behind them. Stitch got his name because he'd sewn his own wounds shut with fishing line on the side of a highway in Texas. Dice always carried a pair of lucky dice that belonged to his dead father. Shorty was 6'3", which Lily found outrageous. That doesn't make any sense, she told him. You're the opposite of short. It's ironic, Shorty said. What's ironic? It's when something is the opposite of what you'd expect. That's confusing. Yeah, kid, it is. Monk, a quiet man with reading glasses and calloused hands who had studied to be a minister before he found motorcycles, said grace before every meal. He demonstrated for Lily, hands folded, head bowed, a brief, quiet prayer. Do you pray? Lily asked him. Every day, Monk said. Does it work? Monk looked at Colt, who was leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed and his eyes red from no sleep. Then he looked back at Lily. You walked up to a Hell's Angel in a parking lot and asked him to save your mom. Now there are almost 1,000 men coming to help you. What do you think? Lily thought about it, seriously thought about it, weighing the evidence. I think maybe I should pray more. Couldn't hurt, kid. But it wasn't all light. Late in the afternoon, Lily went quiet. She stopped drawing. She stopped asking questions. She sat at the table staring at her pile of money, counting it again, silently, her lips moving, her fingers trembling. Colt noticed. He sat down across from her. Hey, you okay? What if she's not there? Lily said. She didn't look up. What if they moved her? What if she's already gone? She's there, Lily. We know she's there. How? Because we checked. My guys checked. She's there and she's alive, and we're coming for her. Lily finally looked at him. Her eyes were red. Her chin was quivering. The composure she'd been holding since the parking lot, that impossible adult composure, was fracturing. What if she's hurt? Colt didn't lie to her. He decided in that parking lot that he would never lie to this girl. She'd earned the truth by surviving 13 days alone. She deserved a world where at least one adult told her what was real. She might be hurt, he said. The bad men aren't nice to her. But she's strong, Lily. Incredibly strong. She held on for 13 days because she knew you were waiting. That's the kind of strong that doesn't break. But what if, Lily, listen to me. Your mom didn't give up. Not once. Not for 1 second. 13 days, and she didn't give them what they wanted. You know why? Lily shook her head. Because of you. Because every minute of every day, she was thinking about you. She was holding on for you. The same way you were holding on for her. You too, you're the same kind of strong. Lily's chin trembled harder. One tear fell, then another. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, angry at herself for crying. Furious. I want my mom, she said. 3 words, the simplest sentence in any language, the most devastating. Colt reached across the table and put his hand over hers. His knuckles were scarred. His fingers were thick and rough. Her hand disappeared completely beneath his. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, Lily. She looked down at his hand covering hers. Then she turned her hand over and gripped his finger. Just one, his index finger, because that was all her hand could wrap around. She held on tight. You really promise? I really promise. Okay, she said. She didn't let go of his finger. Tomorrow. That night, the compound filled with headlights. They came in waves. Trucks pulling trailers loaded with motorcycles, vans, pickups, SUVs. Men arrived in groups of 5, 10, 20. They set up in the field behind the compound, unloading bikes, checking equipment, greeting brothers they hadn't seen in months or years. At 11 p.m., Deacon stood on the compound porch and looked out at the field. Motorcycles stretched as far as he could see, chrome glinting under the stars. Men moving among them like soldiers in a staging area. And at the edge of the property, more headlights still arriving. Still coming. Colt stepped out beside him. Final count? Colt asked. 987, Deacon said, and counting. That's a lot of men for one meth dealer. It's not about him, Deacon turned to Colt. It was never about him. You know how many of these guys have kids? Most of them. Every single one heard the same thing. A 5-year-old girl, alone for 13 days, counting coins to buy her mother back. And every single one thought the same thing. What's that? What if that was my daughter? What if that was my kid standing in a parking lot, waiting for someone to give a damn? Deacon looked back out at the field. That's why they came. Not because I called, not because of the patch, because of Lily. Because a 5-year-old girl did something most grown men never do in their entire lives. What's that? She asked for help, and she asked the right people. Colt said nothing. There was nothing to say. He looked out at the sea of chrome and leather and thought about a girl with $63 and a pair of shoes with a hole in them. And he thought about what tomorrow would bring. Inside the compound, in the back room, Lily slept. Bear sat outside her door. Under her pillow, $63 in crumpled bills and loose coins, pressed flat by the weight of a child's head full of dreams she was too tired to have. In 18 hours, 987 men would ride. But right now, in the silence between the stars and the earth, a little girl was sleeping, and a giant was guarding her door. And somewhere 30 miles away, her mother was lying on a floor in the dark, holding on, holding on, holding on. Lily woke before dawn. She sat up on the cot, eyes swollen, hair wild. Her hand went under the pillow first, fingers touching each bill, feeling the edges of each coin. All there, all $63. She pressed the money back under the pillow and swung her legs over the side. Bear was outside the door. She could hear his breathing, slow, steady, like a truck idling in a parking lot. She opened the door and found him exactly where she knew he'd be. Folding chair, arms crossed, eyes open. You didn't sleep again, she said. I slept. No, you didn't. Your eyes were open when I opened the door. I sleep with my eyes open. It's a special skill. That's creepy, Bear. He laughed. It rumbled through his chest like a small earthquake. Yeah, I guess it is. You hungry? She didn't answer. She stood in the doorway, hands balled into fists at her sides. Not the fists of a child throwing a tantrum, the fists of a child bracing for something she couldn't control. Is today the day? Bear looked at her, really looked. This girl who had aged 10 years and 13 days, standing in a faded pink shirt with bare feet on cold concrete, asking the question her entire life was balanced on. Yeah, Lily, today's the day. You're going to bring my mom back? That's the plan. Are you going to get hurt? The question landed somewhere Bear didn't expect. He'd been asked a lot of things in his life. If he could hurt someone, if he would hurt someone, if he'd already hurt someone. But he couldn't remember the last time anybody had asked if he was going to get hurt, like they actually cared about the answer. Nah, he said, I'm too big to get hurt. That's not true. Big things get hurt all the time. Elephants get hurt. Whales get hurt. You comparing me to a whale? You're bigger than a whale. I'm going to pretend that's a compliment. He stood, his joints cracked like gunshots. Come on, breakfast. Big day. They walked down the hallway together. Lily's bare feet patted silently on the concrete. Bear's boots shook the floor with every step. A giant and a mouse. Neither of them seemed to notice. The main room was already full. More men than yesterday. More leather, more ink, more hard faces turned toward coffee cups and maps. The energy had shifted overnight. Yesterday was preparation. This morning was execution. The air tasted like adrenaline and engine oil, and something else, something you couldn't name but could feel in your teeth. Lily stopped in the doorway. She looked at the room, at the men, at the controlled intensity of their movements. Every head turned toward her. Every conversation died. She walked to the oak table, climbed onto a chair, and sat down. She folded her hands on the table, the same way she'd folded them around her money in that parking lot, and looked directly at Deacon. I want to come, she said. The room went dead still. Deacon set down his coffee. Come where? With you, to get my mom. I want to come. Lily, she's my mom. I should be there. I've been waiting 13 days. I don't want to wait here while everyone else goes. I should be there when she comes out. Deacon looked at Colt. Colt looked at Bear. Bear looked at the ceiling because he knew if he looked at Lily, he'd say yes. And yes was the wrong answer, the absolutely wrong answer. But he'd say it anyway because this girl had already broken every wall he'd ever built, and she could ask him to walk into traffic and he'd check for cars, but he'd go. Listen to me, Deacon said. He leaned forward, forearms on the table. What we're doing today is dangerous. There are bad men with guns. We need to move fast. We need to know you're safe. If you're out there, every single one of us will be thinking about you instead of doing our job. You understand? I'm not scared. I know you're not. That's not the point. Then what's the point? The point is you already did your part. You found Colt. You told us what happened. You gave us everything we needed. Without you, none of this happens. 987 men are here because of you. Because of what you did. Now let us do our part. Lily stared at him. Her jaw was set. Her blue eyes were blazing. She looked like a general being told to stay behind while her army marched into battle. Then slowly, the fire banked. Not extinguished, banked. Okay, she said, but you bring her back. You promised. We promised. All of you promised. She looked around the room, man by man, face by face, and one by one, they nodded. These hardened, scarred, dangerous men, every single one of them nodded at a 5-year-old girl in a faded pink shirt. Good, Lily said. She reached over to someone's plate, picked up a piece of toast and took a bite. Then go. Colt walked outside at 6 a.m., and the sight stopped him cold. Motorcycles, hundreds of them, rows stretching back into the morning haze, chrome catching the first fire of sunrise. Harleys, fat boys, road kings, softails, Dynas, cold and silent and waiting. Men moved among them like soldiers in a staging area, checking tires, adjusting mirrors, strapping on gear. And beyond the field, on the road leading to the compound, more were still arriving. Headlights cutting through the gray dawn, the rumble of engines, a low, continuous frequency that Colt felt in his chest. Stitch appeared at his shoulder. Final count as of 5 minutes ago, 987. We've got chapters from 11 states: Oklahoma, Texas, California, Nevada, Colorado, Kansas, Arkansas, Missouri, New Mexico, Arizona, and Montana. Montana? 4 guys rode all night, said they heard about the girl and couldn't stay home. Colt shook his head. 4 men had ridden through the night from Montana for a child they'd never met, never seen, never spoken to. They'd heard 6 words: 5-year-old girl, 13 days alone, and they'd gotten on their bikes and ridden 700 miles through the dark. He thought about telling Lily, then decided against it. She'd say something that would make him fall apart, and he had a job to do. Deacon stepped onto the porch. He raised his hand. The field went silent, not gradually, instantly. 987 men, quiet at once. The only sound was wind and a hawk circling overhead. "Brothers," Deacon's voice carried without effort. It was the voice of a man who'd spent a lifetime making himself heard, not by shouting, but by saying things that mattered. "You know why you're here. 13 days ago, a mother was stolen from her home, dragged out in the middle of the night while her 5-year-old daughter hid under her bed and listened to her scream. That little girl spent 13 days alone, eating cereal, drinking tap water, counting coins she found in couch cushions and coat pockets. She saved $63, and she walked up to one of ours in a parking lot and asked him to buy her mother back." He paused. Let the words land. Let them settle into the ground like seeds. She didn't know who we are. She didn't know what the patch means. She just saw a man she thought was strong enough to help. And she was right. Colt felt the shift. It moved through the crowd like an electric current. A tightening, a clenching, a collective intake of breath. These men were fathers, brothers, sons, grandfathers. Every one of them was seeing Lily's face in their mind, and then they were seeing their own daughter, their own granddaughter, their own niece. They were seeing a little girl standing barefoot in a parking lot, holding everything she had in the world in 2 shaking hands. "Today we ride," Deacon continued, "not for territory, not for money, not for pride. Today we ride for Lily Parker, age 5, who taught 987 grown men what courage looks like. It looks like a little girl with $63 and a heart bigger than all of us combined." Silence. 3 heartbeats, the whole world holding still. We bring her mother home, we deliver a message, and we do it clean. No body bags, no felonies. We are the line. Today we hold it. He looked across the field, eye to eye with as many men as he could reach. "Mount up." The roar that followed was not a cheer. It was something older, something that came up from the ground, through the boots, through the bones, through the chest. The sound 987 men make when they've been given permission to be exactly who they've always wanted to be. Not outlaws, not criminals, protectors. Engines fired, 1 at first, then 5, then 20, then all at once, a detonation of sound that shook the earth. The ground vibrated, windows rattled, birds exploded from the trees in every direction. Colt straddled his Harley. Torque had driven through the night to deliver the head gasket and had installed it in the parking lot at 3 a.m. by flashlight. The bike was alive again, growling between his legs. Ready. He looked back at the compound. Lily was standing at the window, palm pressed flat against the glass. Bear stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. She wasn't crying. She was watching, memorizing every bike, every man, every engine. Colt raised his hand, not a wave, a salute, a promise compressed into a single gesture. Lily raised her hand back. Colt kicked the bike into gear. The column began to move. From above, it would have looked biblical. A river of chrome and leather flowing out of the Oklahoma plains like something from the Old Testament. 987 motorcycles in formation, stretching back for miles. The sound reached the nearest town 3 minutes before the first bike did. People came out of their houses. They stood on porches and in parking lots and on sidewalks, shielding their eyes against the morning sun. An old farmer at a gas station took off his hat and held it over his heart, though he didn't know why. A woman at a crosswalk held her toddler on her hip and pointed. "Look, baby, look at that." A sheriff's deputy pulled his cruiser to the side of the road, killed his lights, and just watched. He tried to count. He gave up at 300. The column pushed east, then turned south toward Route 7. The landscape emptied. Buildings disappeared. Fences disappeared. The road narrowed. The world opened up. Flat, wide, indifferent. 30 minutes into the ride, Colt's phone buzzed. A text from Stitch, who was riding in the command vehicle a quarter-mile back. "Voss knows something's up. Contact says guards doubled. 10 men confirmed. Rifles." Colt texted back with one thumb. "Doesn't change anything." Stitch replied, "Didn't think it would." The farmstead sat at the end of a dirt road. Chain-link fence, main house, metal barn, 2 sheds, 3 trucks near the porch, and on the porch, 2 men with rifles, their faces twisted with confusion and the first sharp edge of fear. Colt led the first 30 bikes down the dirt road in a V formation, engines in sync, rumbling at a frequency you didn't hear, you felt it. In your bones, in your teeth, in the hollow place behind your ribs where fear lives. One of the guards pulled out a phone. Colt watched him dial, watched him press it to his ear, watched his mouth move, calling Voss, telling him what he was seeing. Good, let him look, let him count, let the math destroy him. Colt killed his engine. The other 29 did the same, one by one, like dominoes falling in silence. And the silence was worse. 987 men. Not a sound, not a voice, not an engine. Just wind and dust and the pounding of a guilty man's heart inside a farmhouse at the end of a dead-end road. The front door opened. Darren Voss stepped out. 36. Lean. Dark hair slicked back. A face that might have been handsome once, but had been hollowed out by methamphetamine and paranoia, and the kind of cruelty that eats a man from the inside until there's nothing left but teeth and appetite. Black shirt, jeans, boots, no visible weapon. His eyes moved across the line of motorcycles. Counting, calculating, failing. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. His voice cracked on the last word. He tried to recover, stepped forward, squared his shoulders, puffed his chest. It didn't work. He looked like a matchstick trying to intimidate a forest fire. Colt dismounted, pulled off his sunglasses, tucked them into his jacket, walked toward the gate. Slow, steady, each step deliberate, each step a sentence in a language Voss understood perfectly. "Darren Voss," Colt said. "Not a question. Who's asking?" "The man who's giving you one chance to do the smart thing. You've got a woman in that house, Megan Parker. You took her from her home 13 days ago. You left her 5-year-old daughter alone. Now I'm here to take her back." Voss's face twitched, a muscle in his jaw, a vein in his temple. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yeah, you do, and here's what you need to understand, Darren." Colt pointed behind him. He didn't look. He didn't need to. "There are 987 men on that road. Every one of them knows your name. Every one of them knows what you did. Every one of them rode through the night to be here right now, and every single one of them is waiting for me to give a signal." Voss's eyes moved past Colt to the road. He could see them now, the line of chrome stretching to the horizon. More bikes than he could count, more men than he could fight, More fury than he could survive if he lived 100 years. "You're bluffing," Voss said, but his voice had gone thin, paper thin. The voice of a man watching the ground open beneath his feet. "Darren, I haven't bluffed since I was 12 years old. Send Megan out, right now, unharmed, and we leave. This ends. You deal with the police on your own terms. But if I have to come through that gate—" He paused, let the silence fill the space. "There won't be enough of this place left to find." Voss's hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets. "She has something of mine, a phone. I need it back. That's all this is. It's a business dispute." "A business dispute." Colt's voice dropped to a register that made both guards on the porch take a step backward. One of them lowered his rifle without realizing he'd done it. "You kidnapped a mother. You left a 5-year-old child to starve in an empty house for 13 days. You call that a business dispute? It's not what— I don't care what you think it is. I care what that little girl thinks. She thinks her mother is dead. She's been counting coins for 13 days trying to buy her back. $63, Darren. That's what her mother's life is worth to you. $63 in crumpled bills and pocket change. A 5-year-old girl's entire world." Voss flinched. Small. Almost invisible. But Colt saw it. A fracture. A hairline crack in the armor of a man who had convinced himself that what he was doing was business. Just business. Nothing personal. Just leverage. Just negotiation. Just the cost of doing what he did. But it wasn't business. It was a little girl eating cereal alone in the dark. It was a mother singing a lullaby to an empty room in her head, because that was the only thing keeping her alive. "Send her out," Colt said. "Last chance." Voss looked at the road again. The 987. Then he looked at his men. 2 on the porch with rifles they were too scared to raise. 8 more inside, maybe 10. Against 1,000. The math was extinction. "You think you're heroes?" Voss said. His voice was shaking now, the defiance gone thin and desperate. "You're criminals. You're gangsters on motorcycles. You think badges are going to look the other way because you—" 2 minutes, Darren. You've got 2 minutes to walk inside that house and bring Megan Parker to this gate. Or I don't give a signal. I don't need to. These men don't need my permission. They just need a reason. And you've given them 987. Voss stared at Colt, reading him, searching for the bluff, the weakness, the angle. He didn't find one. He turned and walked inside. The door slammed. 1 minute passed. Colt's hand rested at his side, steady. His heartbeat was slow, controlled. He'd done this before, not this exactly, but this frequency, this pitch of the world right before something irreversible happens. 90 seconds. Colt reached for his phone. If Voss was making a play, if he was hurting Megan, using her as a shield, trying to run out the back, it didn't matter. Stitch had men covering every exit. The perimeter was sealed. There was no back door. There was no escape. There was only forward or down. 1 minute 45. The front door opened. Voss came out first. Behind him, held by the arm, stumbling, barely upright, Megan Parker. 27 years old, brown hair matted and filthy, a face that had been pretty and was now a map of bruises and exhaustion and something else, something that looked like defiance that had hardened into stone. Her wrists were raw, red, rope burns that would scar. Her eyes were swollen, unfocused, blinking against the sunlight like someone who'd been underground. She looked at the motorcycles. She looked at Colt. She didn't understand. Her brain couldn't process what her eyes were showing her. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Voss pushed her forward. Take her, and get out. Colt stepped through the gate, 4 strides. He didn't touch her. She flinched when he got close and he stopped, held his hands up, palms out, open, the way you approach something wounded and terrified. Megan, my name is Colt. I'm here because of Lily. She's safe. She's been safe for 2 days. She's waiting for you right now." The name hit Megan like a bolt of electricity. Her entire body jolted. Her eyes focused for the first time, snapped into clarity like a lens finding its target. "Lily?" The word came out broken, raw, torn from a throat that had spent 13 days screaming and refusing and begging and holding on. Not a word, a prayer. "She's alive? She's alive. She's healthy. She's been eating grilled cheese sandwiches and bossing around a room full of bikers and telling a man 3 times her size that he's built like a whale. She's fine, Megan. She's perfect." Megan's legs buckled. Colt caught her. She weighed nothing, less than Lily had felt in Bear's arms. She gripped his jacket with both hands, her fingers clawing into the leather, and she made a sound Colt would hear every night for the rest of his life. Not a scream, not a sob, something that came from deeper than either of those. The sound of a mother's heart restarting after 13 days of flatline silence. "My baby," she gasped. "My baby, my baby, my baby." "She's waiting for you," Colt said. "Let's go bring you home." He turned, his arm around Megan, supporting her weight. They walked toward the gate. Behind them, Voss stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, face gray as ash. "The phone," Voss called out. "I still need—" Colt stopped, turned. "The phone is going to the FBI, along with everything on it. Your name, your network, your contacts, every transaction, every delivery, everything. You had 13 days to think about what you were doing. Now you've got about 13 minutes before every cop in the state is at your door." He paused. "I'd start running, Darren, but I'll be honest with you. There's nowhere left to go." Voss's face went white. He looked left, right, the perimeter, the fence, the 987, the ring of chrome and leather closing around him like a fist with no fingers missing. He ran inside. The door slammed. It didn't matter. 30 seconds later, state police cruisers, called by Deacon from a burner phone 15 minutes earlier, came screaming down the dirt road, sirens splitting the morning apart. Behind them, 2 FBI vehicles. Behind those, an ambulance. Voss's men came out first, one by one, hands up, eyes down, rifles dropped in the dirt. Voss was last. He walked out with his hands behind his head. His slick-back hair fell across his face. He didn't look at Colt. He didn't look at anyone. He stared at the ground as they put him in cuffs and folded him into the back of a cruiser. Colt didn't watch. He was already walking Megan toward the ambulance. A paramedic, a young woman named Reyes, with kind eyes and steady hands, met them at the doors. "Let's get you checked out," Reyes said. Megan grabbed Colt's arm. "My daughter. I need to call my daughter." "We will. Let them take your vitals first. 2 minutes." "Now, please, right now. I haven't heard her voice in 13 days. Please." Colt pulled out his phone, dialed the compound. It rang once. Bear answered. "Yeah?" "Put Lily on." A rustle, a pause, the sound of small feet running across concrete. Then a voice, breathless, shaking, so high and clear it cut through everything like a bell. "Colt? Hey, kid. Did you find her?" Colt looked at Megan. She was sitting on the ambulance tailgate, a blanket around her shoulders, an IV in her arm. She was staring at the phone in his hand with an expression that had no name in any language. The desperate, aching hunger of a mother who hasn't heard her child's voice in 13 days. He held the phone out. Megan took it with both hands, shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. She pressed it against her ear. "Lily." The sound that came through that phone was so loud, Colt heard it standing 3 feet away. It wasn't a word. It was an explosion. Raw, wild, every emotion a 5-year-old can feel detonating at once. "Mommy! Mommy, is that you? Mommy!" "It's me, baby, it's me. I'm here. I'm coming home." "Mommy, I saved $63. I was going to buy you back, but Colt did it for free. He brought 1,000 people on motorcycles, Mommy. 1,000. Megan was crying so hard she couldn't speak. She pressed the phone against her cheek. Her whole body shook, tears and relief pouring out in waves that 13 days of captivity had held back. "I'm coming home, baby," she whispered. "I'm coming home right now." "Right now? You promise?" "Right this second." 987 engines fired, one by one, then all at once. The sound rose from the earth like thunder rolling backward, from the ground to the sky instead of the sky to the ground. It filled the desert. It shook the dirt road. It rattled the windows of the FBI cruisers and the ambulance and the bones of every person within a mile. It was the sound of a promise kept. It was the sound of a family being put back together from pieces that should have been too broken to fit. And it was the sound of 987 men who had ridden through the night because a 5-year-old girl with $63 had asked them to be heroes. And they had said yes. The convoy moved slower on the way back. No urgency now. No clock ticking down. No hostage to reach. Just a long column of chrome and leather winding through Oklahoma at 60 miles an hour. And somewhere in the middle of it, an ambulance carrying a woman who hadn't stopped crying since she heard her daughter's voice on the phone. Colt rode at the front. He could have fallen back, let someone else lead, but he didn't. This was his ride. It had been his since the moment a 5-year-old girl walked up to him in a parking lot and changed his life with 3 words. "Can you help?" His phone buzzed in his jacket. He pulled it out with one hand. A text from Bear. "Kid won't sit down, standing at the window. How far out?" Colt texted back. 20 minutes. Bear replied. "She says drive faster." Colt almost smiled. Almost. But his throat was too tight and his eyes were too wet. And there were 987 men behind him who didn't need to see their point man falling apart on the highway. So he didn't smile. He just rode. Behind him, in the ambulance, Megan sat on the stretcher with a blanket around her shoulders. Reyes, the paramedic, was checking her vitals. Blood pressure, pulse, oxygen. Megan let her do it. She wasn't paying attention. She was staring through the small rear window, watching the road fill with motorcycles. "How many are there?" Megan asked. Her voice was scraped raw, like someone had taken sandpaper to the inside of her throat. "A lot," Reyes said. "But how many?" "Ma'am, I stopped counting at 200. There's a lot." Megan shook her head, back and forth, slowly, like she was trying to shake something loose that didn't fit inside her understanding. "I don't get it. Why? They don't know me. They don't know Lily. Why would they do this?" Reyes looked at her. She'd been a paramedic for 6 years. She'd seen car wrecks and overdoses and domestic violence and every kind of wreckage Oklahoma could produce. She'd never seen anything like this. 987 bikers escorting a kidnapping victim home to her 5-year-old daughter. "I think," Reyes said carefully, "your little girl asked them to." Megan pressed her hands to her face. Her shoulders shook. No sound, just tears leaking between her fingers, running down her raw wrists, dripping onto the blanket. "She's 5, Megan whispered. "She's 5 years old. She should have been in school. She should have been playing. She should have been eating lunch at a table, not starving in an empty house for 13 days because I couldn't." "Hey," Reyes put a hand on her arm, firm, steady. "Don't do that. Not now. You're going home to your daughter. Everything else can wait." "You don't understand. I left her. They took me and I left her alone." "They took you. That's not the same as leaving." "It feels the same." Megan dropped her hands. Her face was a map of bruises and grief and guilt so deep it had its own gravity. "Every night in that house," she said, "I'd lie on the floor and think about her. Is she eating? Is she scared? Is she sleeping? Is she alive? I didn't know. For 13 days, I didn't know if my daughter was alive. And I couldn't do anything about it. I just lay there, tied up, useless, listening to them argue about a phone while my baby was alone. Reyes was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would stay with Megan for the rest of her life. You held on. You didn't give them what they wanted. 13 days and you didn't break. You know why you didn't break? Because you knew she was waiting for you. That's not useless. That's the strongest thing I've ever heard of. Megan stared at her. Then she looked back at the endless river of motorcycles through the rear window. She really did it? Megan said. Lily? She really walked up to a stranger and asked for help? That's what they told me. That's my girl. Megan's voice cracked on the last word, split right down the middle. That's my brave, stupid, impossible girl. The convoy turned onto the dirt road. The compound appeared ahead, and in the window, a small face, blonde hair, a palm pressed flat against the glass. Colt raised his fist. The column slowed. Engines dropped to idle. One by one, they killed their motors. The silence that followed was enormous, sacred, like the inside of a church built by 1,000 men who'd never set foot in one. The ambulance pulled up to the compound doors. Reyes opened the back. Megan swung her legs off the stretcher and stood. Her knees buckled. Reyes grabbed her arm. Take it easy. Your blood pressure is... Let go of me. Megan said it without anger, without force, just fact. The fact of a mother who has been separated from her child for 13 days and will not be separated for 13 more seconds. She pulled her arm free, gripped the edge of the ambulance door, and stepped down into the dirt. Colt dismounted, walked toward her. You okay? Where is she? Inside. Bears with... The compound door flew open. Lily came through it at a dead sprint, barefoot on dirt, pink shirt flying, arms pumping. She was running so fast she stumbled twice and caught herself both times without breaking stride. Bear was behind her, trying to keep up, but Lily was a 40-pound missile locked onto her target, and nothing on earth was going to slow her down. Mommy! The words split the air like a gunshot. It carried across the parking lot and hit every man standing there like a physical blow. 987 hardened bikers flinched, not because it was loud, because of what it carried. 13 days of fear, 13 nights alone, a broken door, a van disappearing, the sound of silence in an empty house where a mother used to sing. And now this explosion of joy so pure and so violent, it hurt to witness. Megan dropped to her knees. She didn't decide to. Her body just quit. She hit the dirt with her arms open wide, her face crumbling, everything she'd held together for 13 days collapsing at once. Baby, oh God, baby, come here. Come here, come here. Lily crashed into her. The impact knocked Megan backward. She caught herself with one hand and wrapped the other arm around Lily so tight that Reyes, standing 3 feet away, winced. Lily's legs locked around her mother's waist. Her arms clamped around her neck. Her face buried itself in Megan's hair. And the sound she made was not a word. It was a howl, raw, primal, the sound a child makes when the worst thing in her world suddenly isn't true anymore. Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. I'm here, baby, I'm here. I'm right here. Megan rocked her, back and forth, kneeling in the dirt outside a Hells Angels compound with 1,000 men watching and an IV bruise on her arm and rope burns on her wrists. None of it mattered. Nothing in the world mattered except the weight of her daughter in her arms, the smell of her hair, the grip of her fingers, the impossible, miraculous, unbearable reality that she was holding her child again. I saved $63, Mommy. Lily's voice was muffled against Megan's neck. I counted it 7 times. I was going to buy you back. Megan made a sound, half laugh, half sob, half something that hasn't been named because no one's ever felt it before. I know, baby, I heard. But Colt did it for free. He said, save my money for a birthday cake. He was right, and Bear made me grilled cheese sandwiches, 2 of them, with 3 kinds of cheese, and Monk showed me how to pray. And there's a guy named Shorty, but he's really tall, and I told him that's confusing, and he said it's ironic, and I said, that's also confusing. Megan laughed. It was broken and wet, and it turned into a sob halfway through, but it was a laugh. The first one in 13 days. It felt like breathing after being held underwater. It felt like sunlight on skin that had forgotten what warm was. And Mommy, Lily pulled back just enough to look at her mother's face. Her small hands cupped Megan's cheeks. Her bruised, swollen, discolored cheeks. Lily's expression shifted. The joy drained out of it, and something else took its place. Something old, something adult, something no 5-year-old should ever wear. They hurt you. I'm okay, baby. No, you're not. Your face is all colors, purple and yellow and brown, like a bad painting. It looks worse than it feels. That's a lie. You always say that when it hurts. You said that when you burned your hand on the stove and you cried for 20 minutes. Megan closed her eyes. Tears ran through Lily's fingers. You're right, Megan whispered. It hurts, but it's going to get better now. Because the motorcycle men came? Because you brought them. Megan opened her eyes and looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. The way a person looks at something they thought they'd lost forever and then found again in the last place they expected. You saved me, Lily. Not them. You. You were so brave. I wasn't brave. I was scared all the time. Bear says being brave means being scared and doing it anyway. Bear's a smart man. He's also big as a whale. I told him that. Oh, Lily. He wasn't mad. Behind them, 987 men stood in that parking lot. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was a mother and her daughter holding each other, talking over each other, crying and laughing in the same breath. The most private moment in the world, happening in front of the largest audience most of these men had ever been part of, and not one of them looked away. Colt stood 10 feet back, arms crossed, jaw locked, eyes red. He wasn't the only one. Across the lot, Stitch, the man with the scar along his jawline, the man who'd once broken a man's hand for cheating at cards without changing his expression, was wiping his eyes with the back of his fist and pretending it was sweat. Monk stood with his head bowed, lips moving silently, praying, because that's what Monk did when the world showed him something too big for words. The 4 men from Montana, 4 strangers who'd ridden 700 miles through the night for a child they'd never seen, were huddled together with their backs to the crowd because they didn't want anyone to see them falling apart. Deacon walked up beside Colt. He didn't say anything for a long time. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the mother and daughter, listening to the sound of a family being reassembled. You did good, brother, Deacon said. She did good. All I did was answer the phone. You answered a lot more than a phone, Colt. Lily released her grip on Megan's neck. She slid off her mother's lap and stood up. She reached into the pocket of her shorts and pulled out a crumpled wad of bills and coins. Her $63. She'd been carrying it all morning. She walked toward Deacon, stopped in front of him, held out the money. Thank you for bringing my mom back. You can have this now. Deacon crouched down. He looked at the money in her hand, then at her face. Lily, I told you, no charge. But you came from really far, all of you. Gas costs money. I know because Mom always says gas is expensive. A sound moved through the crowd. 987 men hearing a 5-year-old try to pay for gas. It might have been laughter. It might have been something else entirely. Tell you what, Deacon said, you keep that money, and if you ever need us again, any of us, for any reason, you don't have to pay, you just call. Deal? Lily considered this, seriously considered it, the way she considered everything, with the gravity of a judge and the intensity of a heart surgeon. Deal, she said, but I'm going to pay you back someday, when I'm big. I believe you will. She turned and walked back to Megan. Megan scooped her up, stood on shaking legs, and faced the crowd. "I don't," she started. Her voice failed. She tried again. "I don't know how to thank you. All of you. I don't have words. I don't think there are words for this." "No words needed, ma'am." A deep voice, anonymous, from somewhere in the middle of 987 men. It could have been anyone. It was everyone. Megan nodded. She pressed her face against Lily's hair and held on. The hours that followed were chaos. Organized chaos, but chaos. The sheriff's office sent detectives. The FBI sent an agent from Oklahoma City. A victim's advocate arrived. Reyes and her partner took Megan to the regional hospital. Dehydrated, malnourished, 2 cracked ribs, a fractured cheekbone, ligature marks on both wrists that would take weeks to heal, bruises in places the doctors documented with photographs, and quiet, professional anger. Lily refused to leave her side. She sat in the hospital bed pressed against Megan's body, and every time a nurse or doctor tried to move her, she dug in harder, fused herself to her mother like she was welded there. Finally, a nurse named Barbara, 58, 30 years in emergency medicine, had seen everything twice, knelt beside the bed. "Honey, I need to check your mama's blood pressure. Can you hold her hand while I do it? That helps it work better." Lily examined this medical claim with open suspicion, but she accepted it. She held Megan's hand and watched the nurse like a hawk, tracking a field mouse. Bear stood outside the hospital room door. He'd been standing there for 2 hours. No chair. He didn't need one. He could stand for days. He had before. Colt found him there. "You should eat something," Colt said. "Not hungry. You should eat anyway. You should mind your own business." "She's safe, Bear. They're both safe. You can stand down." Bear looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot. His jaw was set in that way it got when he was holding something back. Something massive. Something that would require structural damage to express. "That kid slept in my arms last night," Bear said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She had a nightmare about the van. She was shaking so hard I could feel it in my teeth. 5 years old, Colt. 5. And she knows what it sounds like when men break down a door and drag your mother out of a house screaming." "I know. And she still walked up to you. She still held out that money. She still asked for help. After everything, after 13 days of hell, she still believes somebody would say yes." "I know, Bear. What if you hadn't been there?" "But I was. What if your bike hadn't broken down? What if you'd ridden past that town? What if she'd walked up to someone else, someone who didn't care, someone who looked at a dirty kid with pocket change and walked the other way?" "Bear, what if nobody said yes, Colt? What happens to her then?" The question hung between them. Heavy, terrible. The weight of every alternate universe where a bike didn't break down, where a man kept riding, where a little girl stood in a parking lot holding $63 and nobody stopped. "But I was there," Colt said. "My bike broke. I stopped. She found me. That's what happened. That's the only version that matters." Bear stared at him for a long time. Then he looked at the floor. "I don't have kids," he said. "Never wanted them. Never thought I was built for it. I'm built for breaking things, not building them, not taking care of them, not sitting outside a little girl's door at 2 in the morning telling her stories about princesses on motorcycles. I'm not that guy. You spent 2 nights guarding her door. You made her grilled cheese. You told her a story that made her laugh when she'd been crying for 13 days. You held her while she slept. That's not breaking, brother. That's the opposite. It's not enough." It was enough for her. Bear didn't answer. He stood there, his massive shoulders pulled tight, his hands hanging at his sides like they didn't know what to do with themselves when they weren't protecting something small and blonde and brave. Inside the room, Lily was telling Megan everything, about the compound and the oak table and the markers and the men with skull jackets who showed her their tattoos, about Monk, who prayed, about Shorty, who was ironically tall, about Stitch, who sewed his own arm, which was gross but also impressive, about Bear, who was a whale and a mountain and the best storyteller she'd ever met. And Colt, Lily said, he's the one who found me. He was smoking a cigarette outside a restaurant, and I went up to him and asked for help. You walked up to a stranger, Megan said, carefully, the measured voice of a mother trying very hard not to say the wrong thing. He wasn't a stranger. You'd never met him, Lily. He was the right person. How did you know? Lily thought about it. That serious, intense thinking she did, the kind that creased her forehead and made her look 40 years old. He had sad eyes, she said, like yours. People with sad eyes are nice because they know what it feels like to be sad, so they don't want other people to feel that way. Megan pulled her closer, pressed her lips against the top of Lily's head, breathed in, the smell of her hair, the smell of her skin, the smell of the child she'd made and almost lost. You're never walking up to strangers again, Megan murmured. What if they have sad eyes? Especially if they have sad eyes. That doesn't make sense, Mommy. I know, baby, I know. At 4 in the afternoon, the hospital discharged Megan. A list of medications, follow-up appointments, strict instructions to rest. Colt drove them home in Bear's truck. Bear rode shotgun. Lily sat wedged between them, one hand on Megan's knee, one hand on Bear's arm, connecting them. A tiny bridge between two worlds that had never touched before and would never fully separate again. They pulled up to the house at 4:47 p.m. Megan stared at the front door. It had been replaced. New wood, new hinges, fresh paint. The broken door she'd been dragged through 13 days ago, gone. Who fixed the door? She asked. Colt glanced at Bear. Bear looked out the window. Some guys from the club came by, Bear said, while you were at the hospital. Megan got out, walked to the door, put her hand on it, solid, strong. She opened it and stepped inside. The house was clean, spotless, dishes done, floors swept, the broken furniture from the night of the kidnapping replaced. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, groceries in the refrigerator, not gas station groceries, real food, milk, bread, eggs, fruit, chicken, pasta, orange juice, cereal, enough for weeks. Megan turned in a slow circle, taking it in, processing. Who did this? She whispered. Colt stood in the doorway with Lily on his hip. I told you, some guys. Bikers clean my house? They're surprisingly good at it. Don't tell them I said that. Megan leaned against the kitchen counter. She covered her mouth with her hand, and she cried. Not the ragged, desperate sobs of the rescue. Quiet tears, the kind that come when the world does something so unexpectedly, impossibly kind that it breaks through every defense you've spent your whole life building. Lily wiggled out of Colt's arms and ran to the refrigerator, threw it open, gasped. Mommy, there's so much food. There's grapes. I love grapes. And oranges. And chicken nuggets. There's chicken nuggets, Mommy. I see them, baby. Can I have grapes? You can have all of them. Lily grabbed a bunch and held them up to Colt. Do you want some? He looked at her, this 5-year-old girl who had survived 13 days alone, who had counted $63 on hot asphalt, who had mobilized 987 men with nothing but desperation and courage, and a pair of blue eyes that could crack open a Hell's Angel like a walnut, offering him fruit, like it was the most precious thing she had. Yeah, Colt said, I'd like that. He sat at the kitchen table. Lily sat across from him. Megan sat beside her daughter, her arm around Lily's shoulders, unable to stop touching her. Like physical contact was the only proof that this was real, that she was home, that the nightmare was over. They ate grapes. Lily got juice on her chin and laughed. Megan wiped it off and kissed the spot where it had been. Lily laughed harder. Megan kissed her again. And again. Forehead, nose, both cheeks, the top of her head. "Mommy, stop!" "Never. I'm never stopping. I'm going to kiss your face for the rest of your life." "That's weird." "I don't care." Bear stood in the doorway. He didn't come in, didn't sit down. He watched the three of them, the mother, the daughter, and the biker eating grapes in the late afternoon light. And he thought about grilled cheese sandwiches, about princesses who rode motorcycles, about a small hand placed on top of his fist, about a voice in the dark asking him not to let the bad men come. He stepped back, pulled the new front door shut behind him, sat down on the porch steps, pulled out his phone, called the compound. "Deacon." "Yeah." "They're home. They're safe. They're eating grapes." A pause. Then Deacon's voice rough around the edges. "Good. That's good. I'm going to stay here tonight, outside, just in case." "I figured you would." "Deacon." "Yeah? That kid called me a whale today." "She's not wrong." Bear hung up. He leaned back against the porch railing, crossed his arms, watched the sun go down over the town. His eyes were wet, but there was nobody around to see, so he let the tears fall. Every one of them. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't blink them back. He just sat there on the porch of a house he'd never been to before today, guarding a family he'd known for 48 hours, crying like he hadn't cried since he was a kid himself. Inside, Lily's voice drifted through the door. And the princess said, "I'm not too small. You're just not paying attention." "Where'd you hear that?" Megan asked. "Bear made it up. He told me stories when I had bad dreams. He sat outside my door all night. Both nights. He didn't sleep." "I need to thank him." "He doesn't like thank yous. He gets embarrassed." "Too bad. He's getting one." "Mommy." "Yeah, baby." "Can they come back? Colt and Bear? Can they visit us?" A pause. Megan looked at Colt across the table. Colt was peeling a grape for no reason, just to have something to do with his hands so he wouldn't have to look up and show what was happening to his face. "Yeah," Megan said. "They can come back." "Promise?" "I promise." Lily reached under the table and pulled out her crumpled wad of bills and coins. She set it on the table between the grape stems and the juice stains and the quiet afternoon light. "I'm going to keep this," she said. "Deacon said I don't owe anything, but I want to remember. I want to remember what $63 can do." Colt looked at the money, then at Lily, then at Megan, whose eyes were shining with something that went beyond tears. Something that looked like the first page of a story nobody had written yet. $63, Colt said, his voice low and rough and catching on something he couldn't swallow. Best money never spent. Lily picked up the pile, pressed it against her chest, the same way she'd held it in the parking lot, the same way she'd held it on the bench, the same way she'd held it under her pillow for 2 nights. She leaned into her mother's side. Megan's arm tightened around her. Nobody spoke for a long time. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of everything that had happened, everything that had been survived, everything that was beginning. Outside, Bear sat on the porch in the falling dark, arms crossed, eyes open, standing guard over a family he didn't know he'd been looking for his whole life. Colt called the next morning. He told himself it was just to check in, just to make sure they'd slept, just to make sure Megan had filled her prescriptions and Lily had eaten something besides grapes. That's what he told himself. He almost believed it. Megan answered on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "How's she doing?" She slept 12 hours straight. First time since, well, first time in a long time. She's on the couch watching cartoons right now. She asked me 3 times this morning if I was really here. She keeps touching my arm, like she's checking if I'm solid. Give her time. I know, she shouldn't have to do that. No 5-year-old should have to check if their mother is real. Colt Colt was quiet for a moment. How are you? My ribs hurt when I breathe. My face looks like somebody used it for batting practice. I can't close my eyes without seeing that room, the floor, the ropes. His voice asking about the phone over and over and over. She paused. But I'm home. My daughter is 10 feet away from me eating cereal and arguing with a cartoon character about whether cats are better than dogs. So I'm the luckiest person alive. You need anything? You've done enough, Colt. That's not what I asked. Megan exhaled, a long, shaky breath that carried 13 days of weight. The fridge is full. The door is fixed. My daughter is safe. I don't need anything. A beat. But if you wanted to come by sometime, Lily would like that. She keeps talking about you. Just Lily? The question surprised both of them. A silence followed. Not awkward, full. The kind of silence that holds a question neither person is ready to answer, but neither person wants to take back. Maybe not just Lily, Megan said quietly. He went back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. He told himself it was for the kid. That wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't entirely the truth either. The first week, he fixed the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink. Megan stood behind him, holding a flashlight she didn't need to hold, and they talked. About everything. About nothing. She told him about the thrift store where she worked, how she was afraid to go back, afraid to leave Lily, afraid of every sound that came from the front door after dark. He told her about the road, about riding at night when the world was silent and the stars were so close you could almost grab one. That sounds lonely, she said. It was. I didn't know it until recently. The second week, Bear showed up unannounced with a toolbox and spent 6 hours rebuilding the back porch steps that had been sagging for years. Lily sat beside him the entire time, handing him nails, inspecting his work, offering corrections. That board's crooked, she said. I've been building things for 30 years, kid. That board is still crooked. Bear looked at it. It was crooked. He pulled the nail out and redid it. Better, Lily said, and patted his arm like he was a golden retriever who'd finally learned to sit. Bear looked at Colt, who was standing in the doorway trying not to laugh. Not a word, Bear said. Wasn't going to say anything. Your face is saying it. My face does what it wants. The third week, Deacon called. How's the family? He asked. He said it casually, but the word didn't land casually. Family. It landed like an anchor dropping. They're okay. Megan's got a long road ahead. The trial's coming. DA wants to throw everything at Voss. Lily started back at school. And you? What about me? You've been at that house every single day for 3 weeks, Colt. I'm not judging. I'm asking. Colt didn't answer for a long time. He stared at the wall of his apartment, the apartment that felt emptier every time he came back to it from Megan's kitchen table. I don't know what this is, Deacon. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not built for this. You weren't built for what happened at that truck stop either, but you walked into it anyway. That was different. Was it? The trial came 5 months later. Darren Voss stood in a federal courtroom in Oklahoma City. Kidnapping, assault, false imprisonment, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. The charges stacked up like bricks in a wall he'd never climb over. The phone Megan had hidden, tucked inside a hollowed-out stuffed bear on Lily's shelf, the last place any man like Voss would ever think to look, provided everything. Every contact, every transaction, every pickup point, every delivery. The FBI didn't just dismantle Voss's operation. They used it to unravel 3 layers of the Salazar pipeline above him. 16 arrests, 4 distribution hubs shut down. The Salazar network cut Voss loose like a gangrenous limb and pretended they'd never heard his name. Megan testified. She sat in the witness chair with her hands folded and her voice steady, and she told the court everything. The night they came, the door breaking, the van, the room, the ropes, the questions that never stopped, The man who hit her when she wouldn't answer, and hit her again when she did. 13 days, she said. Not 11. The prosecution's brief says 11. It was 13. I counted every one. Why didn't you give them the phone? The prosecutor asked. Because it was the only thing keeping my daughter safe. If I gave it up, I had no value to them. If I had no value, they had no reason to keep me alive. And if I wasn't alive, she paused, looked at the jury, 7 women, 5 men, every one of them leaning forward. If I wasn't alive, my daughter had nobody, so I held on. Every day I held on. Because every night, even in that room, even tied to that floor, I'd close my eyes and sing to her. The same song I sang every night at bedtime. You are my sunshine. I'd sing it in my head, and I'd pretend she could hear me. And that was enough to get me through one more day. The courtroom was silent. In the back row, Colt sat in a clean shirt with his beard trimmed, his hands clasped between his knees. His eyes were red. He didn't care who saw. Voss was convicted on all counts. 28 years. No parole. When the verdict was read, his face went blank. He stared at the table in front of him like a man watching his own life end on a flat wooden surface. Megan walked out of the courthouse and found Colt on the steps. It's over, she said. It's over. She looked at him. Her face had healed. The bruises were gone. But her eyes still carried something. Not fear, but the memory of it. The knowledge that the world can break your door down at 2 in the morning and take everything. Thank you, she said, for being here, for all of it, for every single day. I told you, no thanks needed. And I told you, too bad, you're getting one. She reached out and took his hand. He let her. They stood on the courthouse steps, hand in hand, and for a long moment neither of them moved or spoke. They just held on. The way Lily had held her $63. The way Megan had held on for 13 days. The way you hold something when you've learned the hard way that the world can take it from you without warning. The months turned. Colt didn't move in. He wasn't ready. Neither was Megan. But he was there every morning for coffee, every evening for dinner, every weekend for whatever Lily had planned, and Lily always had something planned. He taught her to ride a bicycle in the church parking lot. She fell 11 times, got back up 12. On the 12th attempt, she rode the entire length of the lot without wobbling. When she turned around at the far end, her face was split with the biggest grin Colt had ever seen on any human being. Did you see that? Did you see? I saw it, kid. I'm fast. You're something, all right. Megan opened a bakery. She used a small inheritance from an aunt she barely knew, and a loan co-signed by a man whose credit history was questionable, but whose handshake was ironclad. The shop was called Lily's Kitchen. Colt built the shelves. Bear installed the sign. Monk blessed the place on opening day, which nobody asked him to do, but nobody stopped him either. The Hells Angels became the shop's most loyal customers. Every Friday, 2 or 3 bikes would pull up outside Lily's Kitchen, and men who looked like they belonged in a police lineup would walk in and buy cinnamon rolls and coffee and sit at the counter trading stories while Lily ran out from behind the register to hug their legs and show them her latest drawing. Your shop has the most intimidating customer base in the state, the mailman told Megan once. They tip well, she said. The $63 was framed. Megan put it in a shadow box. Every crumpled bill, every coin, preserved behind glass, and hung it on the wall of the bakery. Below it, a small brass plaque. The price of courage, the value of love. People asked about it. Megan told them the story. Some cried, some laughed. Most did both. 12 years passed. Colt sat in a high school auditorium. He was wearing his leather cut. He always wore his cut. He was wedged into a plastic chair 3 sizes too small for a man his size, and his knees were pressed against the seat back in front of him. Megan sat on his left. Her hand was on his knee. The hand that had once gripped his jacket in a dirt parking lot now rested there like it had always belonged. Bear sat on his right. His massive frame overflowed the chair on both sides. He'd given up trying to fit and simply accepted the structural indignity. Behind them, filling the last two rows, sat 41 Hell's Angels from 7 chapters, all wearing cuts, all crammed into plastic auditorium chairs with expressions of extreme physical discomfort and extreme pride. Stitch was there, Monk was there, Shorty was there, Dice was there. The 4 men from Montana, older now, grayer but still riding, were there. On the stage, a 17-year-old girl with blonde hair and blue eyes and a will of iron stood at the podium. She was the valedictorian. "When I was 5 years old," Lily said, her voice clear and strong and steady, "I saved $63 to bring my mother home." The auditorium went silent. "I didn't know it wasn't enough. I didn't know that money can't buy back the people you love. I didn't know what the world was or how it worked or why bad things happen to good people. I just knew my mom was gone, and I knew I had to do something." She paused, looked at the back rows. "So I counted every coin I could find. I smoothed every dollar bill flat with my hands. I counted it 7 times. And I walked up to the biggest, scariest man I'd ever seen in a parking lot. A man with a skull on his jacket and a cigarette in his hand. And I held out everything I had and I said, 'Can you help me?' Her eyes found Colt. He said, 'Keep your money, kid. You're going to need it for a birthday cake.'" The auditorium erupted, every person on their feet, every hand clapping. In the back rows, 41 Hell's Angels stood up together, leather creaking, hands crashing together like thunder. Bear was crying openly. He didn't hide it. He didn't pretend it was sweat or allergies or the overhead lights. Tears ran down his face and into his beard, and he clapped so hard his palms turned raw. Monk had his head bowed, lips moving. Stitch was wiping his eyes with both fists. The scar along his jaw caught the light. The 4 men from Montana were standing with their arms around each other's shoulders, gray-haired and weathered, and weeping without shame. Colt sat still. One tear traced a slow line down his face. He didn't wipe it away. He'd earned that tear. Every mile of it. Every minute of every day for 12 years. Megan squeezed his knee. He put his hand over hers. That night, 3 people sat in a booth at a quiet restaurant. Orange juice for Lily, wine for Megan, whiskey for Colt. Neat, because some things don't change. Megan raised her glass. To family. Lily raised hers. To $63. Colt lifted his whiskey. The glass caught the light. His hand was steady. His voice was not. "To the bravest kid I ever met," he said, "and the best thing that ever happened to a broken-down biker with a blown head gasket." They drank. In the compound, on a shelf above the bar, next to faded photographs of fallen brothers and a hand-drawn picture of a warrior princess riding a motorcycle, there sat a small glass jar. Inside it, $63 in coins and crumpled bills. Below it, a sign painted in a child's handwriting. Faded now, the letters uneven, the ink bleeding at the edges, but still legible, still true. Still the realest thing in the room. This is what courage looks like. And it was. Courage was not 987 motorcycles shaking the earth. It was not a broken-down door or fists the size of hammers or men in leather riding through the night. It was not the thunder of engines or the silence of 1,000 men standing in a field. Courage was a 5-year-old girl in a faded pink shirt, barefoot on hot asphalt, holding out everything she had to a stranger. Shaking, terrified, alone for 13 days, and saying the 3 bravest words in the English language. "Can you help?" Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. Sometimes they're 5 years old with a pocket full of coins and a heart too big for their body. And sometimes they're sitting in a parking lot with a broken bike, waiting for the one moment that will give their life a meaning they never knew it was missing. If this story moved you, Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the next time someone small and scared reaches out to you, say yes. You never know whose whole world you're about to save.